Those eyes disguise our hide. Bright lights decide the flight. Your heart beats fast despite the truth that love is blind. I just wanna feel anything.
Welcome to the Clean and Filthy podcast with your host, Matthew M.
Hello and welcome back to the Clean and Filthy podcast, where we are clean and serene with a filthy mind in between. My name is Matthew M. I am your host and I am an addict in recovery. Very excited. We're here on episode 17, y'all. We got a great show for you today. We're going to be talking about tradition number 5. We're going to be talking about my favorite moment of the week and, of course, answering more questions from our listeners and viewers. Before we get anywhere into this episode, have to say a huge thank you to our episode sponsors, etc. by Emily. If you are looking for party staffing or event staffing, or you're looking for a job, check out all of her information down in the description below. Have to always say massive thank you to Valentino Khan and Alice in Wonderland and Mad Decent Records for allowing us to use one of my favorite songs of all time, Anything, as our theme music on the Clean and Filthy podcast. Check out all the streaming and download information below as well. Also have to give a huge thank you and a big shout out to our VIP supporters. These are the people on Patreon who are helping grow this podcast and build this product with donations. And they are Alex B, Cindy, Stephanie, Shar, Clint, and Alex T. If you are interested in helping grow this podcast, please head on over to Patreon. Easiest way to get there, go to the website, www.cleanandfilthypodcast.com. In the top right corner, with all the other social media links, is the link to Patreon. And then you can make a donation. For everybody who makes a donation, you get one of these awesome Clean and Filthy podcast stickers. As well, once we grow a little bit more with merchandising, all VIP contributors will be the first to hear about new merchandise launches and some other things that are in the works. We got a couple ideas popping up here. So if you want to help support this product, please head over to Patreon. Donations really, really help. As I always say, they go right back into the product. Whatever I get from Patreon goes right back into production of this podcast, whether it be through new equipment, whether it be through, different advertising options. It all goes right back into the product. So really, you're not investing in me, you're investing in the product, which means it's a better product, which means you'll enjoy it more, hopefully. So shout out to all of our VIP supporters. Have to say a huge thank you and welcome to all of our new listeners, all of our new subscribers. I am constant on that Twitter grind trying to get this podcast out. Also, I know we might be getting some new listeners from a fellow podcaster's podcast. So if you're here from, hearing my interview over on Mr. Stutz podcast, what up, yo? Hope you stick around. Hope you hear something you like. And if you do, please make sure to share it. That is how we grow. So if you are not currently following us on all social media platforms, please head to the website. Again, cleanandfilthypodcast.com. And in the top with all the social media links, we are connected on everything. Please make sure to like and comment and subscribe and tweet and retweet and add and follow and all that. so that we can grow. We can get this out to more people. Gotta say what's up to anybody who's watching live on YouTube right now. We got a great group every single every single Tuesday at 5 p.m. Arizona time. We live stream on YouTube. So if you're interested in that, head on over to YouTube, subscribe to the Clean and Filthy podcast page on YouTube. Make sure you do that so you can get notifications whenever we go live. And we got a fun little group chat going within the live chat there. I love going back and reading it afterwards. So get that live chat popping. And if you are watching on YouTube right now and you want to help support this podcast, please don't forget to download the Clean and Filthy podcast on whatever or all podcast directories that you use. Thank you very much for that. If you are listening to this podcast on a podcast directory and you want to check out the live stream, like I said, every single Tuesday, 5 p.m. Arizona time, live on YouTube, head on over, check it out. But, if you're already on a podcast directory, you might as well throw a couple downloads your way or my way. I'd appreciate it. Cool. Thanks. And if you like what you hear, not only do we ask that you please share it and subscribe and tweet and all that stuff, but also, if you wouldn't mind dropping a rating for how you feel this product is. We are listed on all different podcast directories. So all of those ratings really help us grow and also see, areas for improvement. And if you have any areas for improvement that you think could make this product even better, please reach out to me. You can either do it on the website through the Contact Us page or reach out to me directly at Matthew@CleanAndFilthyPodcast.com. So that's all of the official stuff. Now we got to get into what we do here and what we don't do before we get into our first segment. Again, my name is Matthew M. I am an addict in recovery and the host of the Clean and Filthy podcast. We are a 12-step recovery-based podcast that is live every single Tuesday at 5 p.m. with episodes available for download wherever you consume your podcast later that night. So make sure, if you're here for the first time, welcome. Hopefully it's not your last time. If you're a returning viewer, returning guest, returning part of the family here, thank you for the support. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So what do we do here? Well, we talk about the 12-step recovery model within recovery from the disease of addiction. Again, I am an addict. And this is the Clean and Filthy podcast. But I want to make sure that everybody realizes that this is coming from a unified place of recovery. I will not be speaking about any one specific fellowship or any one specific treatment center or sober living or recovery residence, because I want to make sure I don't violate any of the traditions. I want to stay in line with the traditions. So we will not be discussing my home group or, discussing my fellowship of choice or anything of that nature to stay in line with traditions. But if you have any questions about topics that we don't discuss on the show, please reach out to me directly. I am more than happy to help you, figure out how to get into a fellowship, how to find a sponsor, where to find meetings. I'm more than happy to do all those things. But because I don't want to violate traditions, we won't be doing it on this show. This show is an opportunity to raise awareness about recovery, about addiction, about the things that recovering addicts like myself go through on a daily basis. This podcast is an opportunity to make connections and find support and have additional, resources at your disposal within your recovery. And that doesn't mean it's only for addicts in recovery. We are for addicts in recovery, addicts who aren't in recovery, people who, maybe know somebody who's in recovery or needs to be in recovery, possibly. We are here for anybody and everybody who has been affected in any way by the disease of addiction, which is most people in the world today. And so if you're here and you're like, I don't know if this is really for me, stick around. Maybe you'll hear something you like. Maybe you'll hear something that you identify with. And if you do, please make sure to throw some downloads our way, share the podcast, and really, try to get the word out there. Because at the end of the day, that's what I want to do. I want to help people. And this is one of the best ways that I've found, within my time in recovery that I can carry that message, which is perfect for what we're talking about today within carrying that message. But again, we will not be discussing any of those other elements. And, we want to make sure to stay in line with the traditions. Again, also, if you aren't an addict, that's fine. Stick around and maybe you hear something you like. Because like I always say, the reason I'm in recovery is not to not use drugs. Maybe that's what it started with, but now it's the opportunity to become a better person. And I've maintained from a very early point in my recovery that I believe everybody in the world could benefit from the 12-step model. So if you're not an addict, stick around. Maybe you'll hear something you like. Maybe you'll hear something that vibes with you, and then we'll see you next week. So that's what we do. That's what we don't do. And now it's time to get into our first segment of the week.
Let's head to the lab for some R&D. Recovery and development.
We are in the lab. We are back in the lab for some recovery and development. Side note, quick shout out to one of my best friends who's currently sitting in a lab right now doing big things. I'm sitting in my living room in my virtual lab here. So sort of the same. Anyway, this is the part of the show where we talk about a different step, tradition, concept, or spiritual principle from the 12-step recovery model. We go a little bit deeper within it. We talk about the basics of it, how it applies within the daily life of addicts in recovery, how we apply it within the group of the fellowship, and into our lives in general. So again, this is a chance to learn, have, a lot of the step work and tradition work is very overwhelming when we first get into recovery. I know when I first, stepped into the rooms of recovery, there were so many things up on the walls that I just did not understand. Some of them that, to this day have required some extra effort to truly understand. So this part of the show is where we really get into it. First, just lightly, and then go a little deeper, and then go a little deeper, and hopefully end with a good understanding of what the literature is speaking about within each one of these steps or traditions or concepts or spiritual principles. So we are in order. Last week was tradition 4, which means today is tradition 5. If you have not already listened to the other episodes, I highly recommend that you do. Episodes 1 through 12 were perfectly in line with steps 1 through 12. And then episodes 13 now through 17 are completely not numerically in line. And they're talking about traditions 1 through now 5. So as I say, the step work is basic entry level. Tradition work is a lot deeper, takes a lot more, understanding, and really applies to the things outside of the personal don't use drugs type of element. When we look at the traditions, they really apply on a much wider level within so many areas of our lives. So it can be a lot. It can definitely be a lot to try to work through. So I'm here to help, because that's what we do in recovery. We got a question. What do we say?
Help me.
That's right. So I'm here to hopefully assist in that little journey. And in a way, we get to learn together, which I love. So tradition number 5 says, each group has but one primary purpose: to carry the message to the addict who still suffers. I love this tradition because there's so many times within recovery that, I default back to this. I default back to this tradition. And, it really keeps that focused idea of what we do in recovery, of what the purpose is for us in recovery. And I'm excited for this one. I'm really excited. I'm just having a really good day anyway. I'm wiling out today a little bit. Anybody who follows me on Snapchat has seen that I'm on one today, and that's before the old yeet juice is even kicked in. So, good luck. So first, before we go into the details of this tradition, we have to talk about the spiritual principles involved. And we've got unity, we've got integrity and hope. We've got empathy, passion, and compassion, and purpose. And again, like I always say, when it comes to the traditions, so many spiritual principles really tie in. These are the ones that just personally really vibe with me the most and really jump out at me the most. So those are the ones that really within working this tradition we're gonna be touching on. Phrasing. But we're gonna be going into a little bit within these. But before we even get into that, the thing that we have to look at, and I love it, says in the literature that the carrying the message is the group's fundamental reason for existence. The fundamental reason for existence. Not one of the reasons, not, on the list of reasons. It is the reason. And what I love about this tradition is how directly it ties in with the 12th step. If you have not listened to episode 12 of the Clean and Filthy podcast, where we discuss the 12th step, please head on over wherever you consume your podcast from. Check it out, because it really will play a lot into this episode within tradition number 5. Because the 12th step, says that having had a spiritual awakening as a result of working these steps, we continue to carry the message to the addict who still suffers. So it's almost like the 12th step is what each member does singularly, and the 5th tradition is what the group does as a whole. But it's that same idea. It's that same idea of the most important thing is to carry that message. And we're going to discuss that a little. We're going to discuss what the message is. We're going to discuss, how we do that. But we have to look at the fact that there's a difference between the purpose of a member in a way and the purpose of a group. Members come into recovery to find freedom from active addiction and a new way to live. And this can lead to, a personal purpose. I know for me personally, that initial desire to stop using drugs led to my personal purpose, which is to carry the message and help people. That is what I feel my purpose in life is. To actually have the ability to help others. And so this element of the 5th tradition doesn't just apply to groups. It can also build within members themselves. And it says in the literature, one thing I love, it says that instead of chasing empty goals, today we are driven by a sense of purpose. And that is so true. In the past, any goals that I might have that never, actually got to a level of success were vastly empty. Even a lot of the goals that I would have, I want to make this amount of money. I want to do this. I used to have this goal in life that I wanted to get a certain amount of money so I could always use drugs. And that's not a purpose. That's not a purpose for life. But recovery has given a purpose to my life. And the beautiful thing is that the process is cyclical in a way, because it says in the literature that, we get the message when we carry the message, and we find a purpose when we serve a purpose. So it's like the more that we do it, the more that it occurs. The more that we do it, the more that it occurs. And that is so true. And we're going to talk about that a little bit further down in this segment. But it's so true. The way that we grow is by showing our growth. And we'll get into that a little bit further, because that sounds a little confusing now that I said it out loud. But we'll get to that. So that's kind of what the member element of it is. But what about from the group perspective? Because it says in the literature, however, groups aren't addicted and don't recover. Groups themselves do not recover, right? But the group itself is the most powerful vehicle that we have for carrying the message of recovery. The group itself, not the individual members, but the collective group. And carrying the message is what allows the fellowship to continue to live and help others. Because groups provide consistency. They provide unity. They provide purpose. And consistency is an important thing. It can be one of the greatest tools, that we have on all topics, not just in recovery. But consistency truly is key. I was talking to somebody last night about, consistency is key in regards to something that had nothing to do with recovery. But it's so true when we apply it to the group as a whole. Because when groups consistently meet at a specific time, you know that group is going to be there. When groups consistently have empathy, you know that empathy is going to be there. When groups consistently have unconditional love, you know that love is going to be there. When groups carry an honest, clear message in their honest, shares, that honesty is consistent. And it's so important because if we're just looking at each individual member, there are going to be times that a member might not share honestly, that they might not, hold a responsibility consistently, that they might not have unconditional love or empathy at all times. Because again, members are simply human, and humans are susceptible to character defects, to feelings, to the things that life on life's terms brings. But when we look at the group, their consistency within that means even if I go to a meeting and I'm not full of empathy or unconditional love, there's a room full of other addicts who are. And this speaks to that element of, what I can't do alone, we can do together. Because the power of numbers, the strength of numbers, it's like you can have a bunch of different, individual amazing people. But when they come together and form like Voltron, like shit can get done. Like Wu-Tang Clan example. Every member of Wu-Tang Clan is a great rapper. You put all of Wu-Tang Clan together, all-time great.
That part.
I guess since I was going to use the that part button, I should have talked about TDE and, Kendrick and Schoolboy and all them. But whatever, I digress. That speaks to the element of strength in numbers. And it also ties in another example. If I see an addict on the street and I go, and I go and I just talk to him and I try to help him and I'm like, hey, man, I used to be in that same position. Maybe check this out. While I'm carrying the message, that might not hold as much value or as much weight as if that same addict walks into a room with 30 to 80 other addicts. Again, the strength in numbers of that, the ability for the group to come together in a unified purpose and carry that message. And we're gonna get deeper into this. But first, we got to kind of look at how it ties in, with the fourth tradition. Because again, there's no governing boards as to, how the group carries that message, fulfills its primary purpose, and we talked about this last week that there are different types of groups, whether it be speaker meetings or topic meetings or men's meetings, women's meetings, whatever it is. There are so many vastly different meetings, and different group styles and different group energies. As long as the message is the primary purpose, as long as carrying that is the primary purpose, whatever else there is within it is fine. And all our groups can do, it says in the literature, it says all our groups can do is plant the seed for recovery and bring addicts together so that the magic of empathy, honesty, caring, sharing, and service can do their work. At the end of the day, we can't force an addict to hear a message. But if the primary purpose of the group is to carry that message, an addict is much more likely to hear it. An addict is much more likely to vibe with that message if it's a clear, correct message. And we'll talk about that a little bit when you get into mess versus message. We'll talk about that a little bit further. But what is the message, right? We've been talking about this message. Well, what is the message? The message, straight out of the literature, is that an addict, any addict, can stop using drugs, lose the desire to use, and find a new way to live. Period. That is the message.
That part.
That right there. That's the message. That an addict, any addict, can stop using drugs, lose the desire to use, and find a new way to live. And again, this ties in with the third tradition of any addict. It's not, nobody's too rich or too poor to recover. Nobody's too white or too black or too Latin or too straight or too gay or too whatever, too Christian or Jewish or Muslim or Republican or Democrat or pro-choice, pro-life. It doesn't matter. Any addict. It doesn't matter if you were the worst quote-unquote type of addict or you weren't that bad of an addict. It doesn't matter. That's why we always talk about that. It doesn't matter what you used, how much or how little you did, who your connections were. None of that shit matters. All that matters when you come into the rooms is what you want to do about your problem and how we can help. And how we help is by having a unified group purpose. And that purpose carries hope. That purpose carries the freedom, the freedom from active addiction. And we see that at meetings. We see that at groups. And, when we come together and share honestly and openly and invigorate and light that spark of hope, it allows things, as it said, the magic to happen. It says in our literature, it says, our work carrying the message means that no pain is wasted. And I love that because if I can help one person, whether it's in a meeting, whether it's on this podcast, whether it's randomly, out in front of a Circle K, that means that my pain was worth it. And that, that's a weird thing. Sometimes it still doesn't feel like some of the pain I've gone through was worth it. But I know that when I share honestly and when I share with a clear message, that another addict who maybe went through that same thing is able to identify with that and able to get hope from that. And the beautiful thing about this tradition is that it ensures that this element of recovery, this atmosphere of recovery, is maintained. That's literally what it does. It ensures that this atmosphere of recovery is maintained. Because the therapeutic value of one addict helping another is without parallel. I've talked about this before. I love that statement because it is so true that the therapeutic value of one addict helping another is without parallel. And when we have a group purpose that is specifically to carry the message, then that message doesn't get diluted. It says in the literature, it says, we never know where our message of hope will come from. Keeping our primary purpose allows us to all carry the message and gives each of us the ability to hear it. This is part of the reason why we've talked about it before, that, we are respectful of the language that is used in that fellowship. Because if I go into a fellowship and I don't use that language that is used, I'm not carrying a message of that fellowship. So that's part of the reason why, you'll hear some people say, hey, we don't say that word in this fellowship because that doesn't align with the primary purpose of this fellowship, with the, what the message truly is. And so that's part of the reason that we discuss that. But that's also why we don't talk about politics or money or personal issues that aren't recovery related, because all of those things can dilute the message. It's not a Republican meeting of so-and-so fellowship, because that ties in an outside issue. That brings in something that could dilute the message. It's not a millionaires only meeting. Or, in order to share, you have to be this race or this religion. None of those things occur so that we can carry a clear message to the addict who still suffers. Not this type of addict. I'm not trying to carry a message only for a heroin addict or only for an alcohol addict or only for a meth addict. I'm trying to carry a message of recovery from the disease of addiction. That's why we don't care what the drug is. We aren't about being drug specific. I'm not a recovering heroin addict. I'm not a recovering meth addict. I'm not a recovering oxy addict or alcohol addict. I am a recovering addict. So when I share as simply a recovering addict, I'm carrying a clear message of recovery. And now that's not to say that it doesn't still happen. There have definitely been times in my 3.5 years in recovery that you hear people bringing up outside issues, especially in a pandemic, especially in the political climate that has been in America. So it does happen. And sometimes, I'll admit it, I've even done this. Sometimes, like, after I realize, like, oh, wow, I'm totally, like, not carrying a message. Okay, let's try to throw a little message in here to even out the mess that I just did or the outside issue I brought up. I realize that. But again, we are human. We're never going to 100% follow every single piece of, traditions perfectly because we're human. So it does happen. But when we keep the focus on carrying the message, outside issues aren't as big of a thing. Outside issues aren't able to dilute that clear message. And again, that can take work, that can take effort, that can take sometimes afterwards, somebody going up to a member or a member coming up to myself and saying, hey man, was that really the message? And that's okay. That's sometimes what we do. Sometimes we need to be there to help each other realize when we've overstepped something or not, completely integrated a tradition into our recovery. So that's, again, we help each other.
Help me.
I just love being able to use that sound button. I love that so much. So, there are so many beautiful things that come out of recovery. So many beautiful things. You make friends. You make, connections with people that are some of the greatest connections I've ever made in my life. You might end up finding a new job or finding a significant other or ending up with a family and kids, and all that's beautiful, but that is not the primary purpose. And the primary purpose of a group is not to have a bunch of friends. The primary purpose of a group is not to find a new job. The primary purpose of the group is not to find somebody and have sex. The primary purpose is to carry the message to the addict who still suffers. And I will say that can be difficult at times. My home group has a lot of newcomers. It is a newcomer meeting. And so there will be times, depending on the ebbs and flows of, who's there or what treatment centers are maybe there, the message isn't that clear. And then that's where members of the home group, need to make sure to share the message. We'll talk about this a little bit later, between the mess versus message being shared, because that's an important thing. When I go to a meeting, it's amazing seeing people that I'm friends with. It's amazing bullshitting with people and laughing and joking and having fun. But the purpose of being in a meeting is to carry the message. All those other things are great. But the purpose is to carry the message, to hear the message, to grow within recovery. And sometimes ego will happen. Sometimes character defect will happen. Sometimes, somebody just wants attention. Sometimes, I'll admit, especially early on, there were shares that I specifically shared to try and, sound cool. That's not carrying the message. That's trying to fluff my fucking bruised ego because I was so broken that I felt the only way to feel better about myself was to fluff up my ego rather than looking at the things I could do internally to grow. So those things do happen, but they happen less and less the longer that we are in recovery. Ideally, that is the purpose of recovery. That is the purpose of working steps, of working traditions, is to grow. For myself personally, my purpose is to grow, and the more I grow, the more I can carry a clear message to the addict who still suffers. The less that I need to feed ego or character defects or whatever. I don't have to do that. I'm not saying I don't always do that. There are times that happens. Again, I am human. So that occurs. But this is why we have to focus on carrying the message, having that unified purpose. And you'll notice that some groups, and we talked about this last week, that groups develop this vibe and this, personality of the group, but that is not its purpose. You might have a group that is super wild and crazy, or some group that's super professional, or some group that's, whatever it is. That's not its purpose. That might be its identity. That might be its vibe. That might be what is attractive to, to some people, but that's not its purpose. The purpose is to carry the message. That is it. And that's why meetings work with all different formats and all different personalities and all different topics and all different religions and races and sexual orientation. That's why it works, because the primary purpose is the one thing that's held. I don't want to say sacred, because then that elicits like cultish sky daddy type vibes, and that's not what we're trying to do here. But it's the one thing that is kept the primary purpose. It is the most important thing, because when that one specific collective effort is on one thing, then it allows every walk of the world to vibe with it. And one of the craziest things, and I've talked about it before, is when, you'll be in a meeting and sharing or helping another addict with somebody who is the antithesis of yourself, of myself. And that has happened so many times. There are so many times that a person I don't vibe with in any way, shape, or form outside of the meeting says exactly what I need to hear in the meeting, or helps me, 12-step another person, or talk to a newcomer. Because that's when we have that group purpose, nothing else matters. And we've talked about this in previous episodes, how that is that element of unity. And when we have a unified purpose, we can carry that message correctly. And I don't want to say correctly, because correctly makes it sound like there's wrong ways and this and that. And I'm not trying to say that. But we could carry that message to the best of our group's ability. And that's such a beautiful thing. That's literally why, we have meetings all around the world. Fellowships that originated in the United States of America work worldwide. Because when we carry that that one primary purpose, it doesn't matter where you're from. It doesn't matter what drug you used. It doesn't matter how you use that drug. What matters is how the message is carried. And I want to say, I'm talking a lot about having a unified purpose, but we've talked about it before. A unified purpose does not equal uniformity. And that's such a beautiful thing. That's such a beautiful thing, where we can be in a meeting and I can share after somebody who just shared who's the complete opposite of me. I'm a very loud, excitable, outgoing type of person, very passionate, especially when it comes to recovery. So how I carry the message is going to be a little different than how somebody else carries the message. But that's fine, because we're both carrying the same message, just in different ways. As we talked about last week, our vehicles are a little different. He might be driving that 65, 69 Caprice Classic. I might be driving a Lamborghini Centenario. Whatever. We're still on the same path of recovery, carrying the same message of recovery, just in different ways. And that's why that is one of the most attractive things about recovery, like we talked about last week. When we have that ability to be myself. Because if somebody told me that I had to share the message in a specific way, that would be a problem. That would be a problem. Because I don't do well with that. I don't do well with trying to be fake. I don't do well with trying to put a limiter on my throttle. I don't do well with that. So the fact that we have the ability to all share and carry the message with a common purpose allows us to all grow so beautifully. And it's funny because so often I've heard things about, what people say happens at meetings opposed to what really happens at meetings. So often, and myself, I thought it prior to going to meetings. I was like, man, this is going to be a bunch of people sitting around talking about how badly they want to use drugs. So why would I go there when I already want to use drugs? Why would I want to go there and just listen to other people talk about drugs? And that's not the reality. I suggest everybody go experience a meeting. Make sure it's an open meeting, so it's open to everybody and not just addicts. But go and experience it and see what is actually being discussed. And that doesn't mean that sometimes at meetings, they don't have more mess than message, especially with newcomer style meetings where there's a lot of new people that haven't, carried that message enough to really learn the message, haven't shared the message enough to get the message. And that's okay. But for the vast majority of meetings that I have been to, and I have been to hundreds upon hundreds of meetings in multiple states, the message is always the message. And there might be a little mess sprinkled in, little like salt-based status, sprinkle a little mess into it. But the vast majority is the message, because that is how we provide hope. That's why, the further you get in your recovery, the less you care about like talking about war stories. War stories are what we talk about, our active addiction. When I first would share, there would be tons of war stories. There would be tons of mess. But at the end of the day, if you're sitting in a room with me in a recovery meeting, I don't need to talk about drugs because you already know how to use drugs. That's why you're sitting here with me. What I can talk about is how I have hope. I could talk about the message that an addict, myself, any addict, can stop using, lose the desire to use, and find a new way to live. So the mess starts to go away. The war stories start to go away. And as we get more time in recovery, our message becomes much clearer. So this tradition becomes easier to implement. Some of these steps, some of these traditions take effort to really work into our recovery, to work into our lives, to work inside of us. This, especially for myself, really doesn't. The more literature I read, the more spiritual principles I implement in my life, the more that I've worked steps and worked traditions. This tradition just happens. It's just like a byproduct of it. And that's beautiful. Like my personal journey of carrying the message is because of all of those things. And my personal journey to now having this purpose it's funny. It says in the literature, and this ties perfectly with myself. It says carrying the message will always be where we find our deepest rewards. And that is so true for me. Because I love talking. We know I love talking. I have fun talking, right? I could talk about a lot of topics. Some of them with more knowledge than others. Obviously, Lamborghinis, sports. There's definitely some things I can talk about with knowledge. And I will talk about with passion and love. But nothing compares to the vibe I will have talking about recovery. Because as much as I love Lamborghinis, Lamborghinis didn't save my life. As much as I love sports, sports didn't save my life. As much as I love music, music might have saved my life at a couple times in instances. But as a whole, guess what? Listening to music didn't keep me from using drugs. Watching TV or watching sports didn't keep me from using drugs. I love talking about movies. Watching movies didn't keep me from using drugs. So recovery being that one tied in element that has helped just up to this point me experience this message and have a new way to live. How am I not going to have passion to talk about that? I will always feel so much more excitement and more excitable and have more passion when I'm talking about something that saved my life and could save someone else's life. That is the beautiful thing of it. That's why I like reading the literature. That's why I like, knowing stuff enough so when somebody asks me a question, I can say, well, it says in the literature, this is what it says. So when somebody has a question about something, I can help. And if I can't help, I can send them to somebody who can. That's why I love doing this podcast, because every time I do this podcast, especially for the first section, I am carrying the message. I am walking the message and I'm carrying it. And I love being able to do that. Like, I just get so hype about that, man. I just get so hype about that, because if I can help one person, then my pain was worth it. My suffering was worth it. If I can help one person who's gone through what I've gone through, and maybe they don't have to go through everything I went through, and I can help that person by carrying the message, then why wouldn't I do that, man? Like, why wouldn't I do that? So I love the fifth tradition so much. It's always been one of my favorite things. I love how it ties in with the 12th step, because I love the 12th step as well. And I love, figuring out my way of carrying the message, whether it's this podcast, whether it's bumper stickers on my car, whether it's wearing, clothing of my fellowship, whether it's just talking to somebody from my past who only knew me when I was using and now sees me now, and getting to talk about that, whatever it is. I love it so much. I love it so much. So I'm going to close with this quote. I really like this quote, and it ties in so well with the fifth tradition, from a group perspective. It says, if our group purpose were anything other than to carry the message, many would die and few would find recovery. And that's true, because we talked about before, some groups aren't attractive to some people because of whatever the vibe is, whatever the reason is. But if now we had this additional level to it, it's like not only is this a group personality I don't like, but now there's this additional, outside issue that's going to be so detrimental to the fellowship as a whole, to addicts seeking recovery. So when we have that solo purpose of carrying the message, even if it's in a way that somebody doesn't like, it's still the message. If somebody doesn't like my personality, that's fine. But I'm going to still carry the message. And it's going to be the same type of message that somebody else is going to carry, maybe in a vehicle that they vibe with more. So love the fifth tradition. Hopefully that was informative. Hopefully it made some connections, is a little more possible to understand kind of what the fifth tradition is all about. As I said, traditions are next level type of stuff, and hopefully you guys got something out of that. I love doing the traditions because I learn more and more about them. I've worked through all of the steps, and I'm doing my second run through on them. But the traditions take a lot more energy and effort, and learning things different ways. And thank you guys for allowing me to work through these with you. So hopefully that was helpful. Now we are going to get into our next segment. But of course, I still have not been sponsored by Bang yet, even though I should be, since every single time after this segment, before the next segment, I have to take a second to drink some Bang. So Bang, sponsor me. All right, we're back. And now we are on to our next segment of the show, called My Favorite Moment of the Week. This is the part of the show where we talk about something that has occurred over the past 7 days. And it might be something from the news, from sports, from entertainment, pop culture, Instagram, TikTok. Still not on TikTok. Any of those type of things. Something that was my favorite moment of the week. And again, this is my personal opinion. I love sharing my experience, strength, and hope, but there's definitely some personal opinion within here. But of course, there isn't always just one moment, because I don't like having too few of options. I like options. So we just talk about all my favorite moments of the week. That's what we do here. So what happened over the last 7 days in my brain and my world? So we got to talk about playoff basketball. I know a lot of people out there don't like sports, but I can't help it. These playoffs are so good. Seriously, Suns closing out the Lakers in 6. And I mean, absolute destruction. And well done, Suns. And I will say, even with Anthony Davis's injury, even if he had been healthy, I don't think that they would have beaten the Suns with how well the Suns were playing. Then the Nuggets closed out Portland. Game 1 was last night between the Suns and the Nuggets, and what an amazing team effort. Like everybody showed up. Ayton, bro, I am watching this growth, holding Jokic at an even plus minus. Like, yes. It was also really fun because I watched the game at Buffalo Wild Wings. So it was almost like I was back at the stadium because there was like 50 or 60 people cheering and wilding out, and it felt really nice. Also, side note, Buffalo Wild Wings now has a Carolina Reaper wing challenge that I think I might partake in. We're actually going to talk about this a little bit later. Continuing on with the NBA, got to give a shout out to the Clippers for, not clippering it away like they're, notorious for doing and actually winning a playoff series. Sorry, Knicks fans. Love you guys, but sorry. Also, bullshit that Tom Thibodeau won Coach of the Year over Monty Williams. Bullshit. Obviously, look at the team difference, quality from where they were. Bullshit. Bullshit.
That part.
But of course, the NBA has to keep the Knicks fans happy, has to keep Spike Lee and his little miniature self on the sideline happy. So, whatever. Enjoy it. No, it's bullshit. I digress. Brooklyn. Where Brooklyn at? Destroying Milwaukee. Last night's game, they won by 40. Come on, bro. James Harden even playing, and you won by 40. Bucks are dead. Maybe they'll win a game. They ain't gonna win both at home. Series is done in 6, maybe just 5. Whatever. Playoffs are going. That's all we're gonna talk about the playoffs right now. Just because, we'll probably have to save for next week. Another favorite moment of the week, my interview on the Mr. Stutz podcast is officially online. It was a great episode. I put all of the information for his podcast in the description below. Head on over. I sent his Anchor page, so that'll link to any of the different podcast directories. Definitely check it out. It was a lot of fun. Really, great conversation. I also, for some people who maybe haven't heard some of my story, we discussed some of my story on there as well, which we might end up doing on this podcast at some point and giving an episode kind of breaking down all the elements of my story. But all of his links are there. So again, shout out Mr. Stutz Podcast. Great voice within recovery, on the podcasting scene. So check him out. Also got to give a shout out to India. COVID is finally, the COVID crisis that was going nuts has started to subside a little bit, I guess. Restrictions have been loosened, so hooray for that. A lot of people want me to talk about something that occurred on Saturday. I refuse. That was not a boxing match. That was a pseudo boxing debacle. The only thing I'm going to say about it, and I'm not naming anybody's names because they don't need to get any more publicity from that bullshit. Probably fake rigged at the end. The short dude holding the big dude up. Bullshit. But the fact that nobody cares about boxing, the fact that literally 2 months ago, all 4 belts were unified in boxing, and Teofimo Lopez, shout out to him. I'm going to say his name. Say his name. Because he put on a great performance. And he unified 4 of the belts. But nobody cares about that. All they care about is somebody who's 0-1-1 as a professional boxer fighting a dude who is the greatest boxer of all time. How is that not disrespectful to the sport? I don't even really care that much about boxing. But to the dude who isn't a boxer, I will give you a golf clap. Because in the span of 7 years, you went from being an unemployed college dropout to in the ring with the greatest boxer of all time when it wasn't about skill. It wasn't about anything about other than money. So I guess I have to say shout out to you for your grind and your hustle. Like, it's true. It was a win for you as soon as he agreed. But also, shame on the other dude for not caring enough about the culture of boxing and being another black eye on a sport that has been notorious for black eyes. Literally, see what I did there? Boom, that joke. I mean, it's just ugh. I said I wasn't going to talk about it, and then I spent 5 minutes talking about it. That had me pissed off, like low key. But we're going to go to a happier topic now. I'm thinking that we might just have to add a segment within my favorite moment of the week to something like This Week on TikTok. Ugh. I'm still not on TikTok. I will be on Pornhub before I am on TikTok. I'm still not on TikTok, but so many of them TikToks. So I got to give a shout out to one of the favorite video producers, content creators. You know, thankfully I see everything that falls down, trickles down. I'm part of like the trickle down social media life where everything that's good on TikTok either is sent to me or is posted on Instagram or Facebook. I'm going to murder his name because apparently I murder TikTok creators' names, but it's either Kabi or Kabe Lam or Lame. He's Italian, so I don't know. 21-year-old Italian factory worker who was fired because of the pandemic turned to TikTok and now has over 65 million followers. Most of his most popular clips, he doesn't say a word. He takes a video of somebody doing something that is completely unnecessary, like chopping the skin off of a banana, and then he proceeds to open the banana and then does that look. And the organic feel of it, I love. I love the fact that it's not overly produced and perfectly shot. Like some of his things have been shot on a old phone with bad lighting, no backdrop, no set staging or anything. It's just him. And I love that. And he's literally grown organically. He's not some super rich, influencer who flashes his stacks and everybody watches his shit. No, he's just a dude. Shout out to him. If I ever get on TikTok, he will be the second person that I follow after Angry Reaction Dude. That's gorgeous. All right. Anyway, have to say, this is for me here. Have to say, whoever created the Muddy Buddy pretzel variants, I love you and I hate you from the bottom of my soul. Because I've always had a huge love affair for Muddy Buddies. If you don't know, they are the rice checks that are covered in peanut butter and chocolate and powdered sugar. Back in the day, one of my friends used to make them for me when I worked at Wells Fargo. I used to call them crack checks because no matter how many bags I got, I ate them all and I wanted more. And then they came out with the real ones, so I could buy them and eat them whenever I wanted. And now they have the pretzel versions. And of course, right when I'm trying to lose weight, I discover these things, and it's a problem. Also, from the world of the internet, shout out to old girl on video shoving a bear off of a wall who was trying to attack her dogs. Like, didn't even think about it, just rolled up on old mama bear and just went whoop, yeet. Yeah, that was pretty nuts. Like, shout out to her. I get it. Protect your animals. I get that. But my actual favorite moment of the week was something that came together organically and brought a lot of joy to me. And that is, I was part of a group of people who started a new meeting, a new recovery meeting. And kind of give a background of how it happened. When the pandemic occurred, my home group immediately went to the virtual platform and had meetings every night virtually. But now that things, as we've discussed, are opening back up and we're trying to figure out how does that look and all that, the virtual platform for my home group went away. But during that time, we were able to use the benefit of the virtual platform and connect with addicts all over the world, literally all across the country, from other countries. Like we were able to develop these connections. And so once this virtual platform was going away, the options were either, lose contact with these people in a meeting or do something ourselves. So we did it. And it's funny because in the past, I'd wanted to start a meeting back in the day, like back when I used to vape. I wanted to have a vape meeting at like super late night, for selfish reasons. But this was the ability to carry the message, to fill a need, like we talked about in Tradition 4, and have that autonomy. as a group to develop a meeting to fill that need, to fill that void. So now we're able to continue this meeting with people from all across the country. And it's crazy because I did not think that it was going to go that well on our first meeting. And we ended up with 12 people from 4 different states. That to me is amazing. That to me speaks to the benefit that the fellowship has been able to create out of this horrible pandemic situation. That now we're able to carry this message and to people across the country. And it was just so beautiful. It felt really good to be able to be a part of it, to do the help do the legwork with it, help develop the script, help develop the flyer, help get some publicity out for it, and then get to host it. It was so cool. So if you're looking for a virtual meeting, hit me up about the details. It's Wednesday nights at 7 p.m. I'm not going to put up more info into this, again, to stay in line with traditions. But if you're curious about it, hit me up directly, Matthew at CleanAndFilthyPodcast.com, and I'll be more than happy to get you the info. So that was my favorite moment of the week. It was, it's one of those type of moments where it's difficult to verbalize, like how good it felt, and like the feeling of responsibility and the feeling of like carrying the message. It's just it's cool when you have opportunities in recovery to do exactly the words of traditions or steps. Directly carrying the message. Direct group autonomy. It was really cool. So shout out to everybody else who was involved with that. And, we did some big things with it, and it feels really good. So that was my favorite moment of the week. If you have any moments, any news, any Instagram, any TikToks that you want to send me, please do. You can hit me up on any social media. I'm on all of them. Or email me directly with news stories or Instagram or memes or whatever, so I can look at them and laugh about them, and we can laugh together. And then maybe I'll talk about them on the show, and we'll all laugh together, because that's what we like to do in this section of the show. So that's what we got. We'll see what happens over the next week for what my favorite moment of the week next week is. And now we are into our next segment.
It's time to Ask an Addict with your host, Matthew N.
That's right. It is time to Ask an Addict. I am an addict. You guys have questions. I will answer them to the best of my ability of experience, strength, and hope, and some opinion. That's what we do here. Also, shout out anybody who's watching this on the live stream. I had camera issues, so I apologize that I look like a translucent ghost right now. I had to go to the backup camera, and the backup camera apparently wants me to look like Casper or something. So shout out if you're watching that right now, or if you watch this at another point on YouTube. That's why. Blame my GoPro. But I digress. This is the part of the show where I answer questions, and they don't have to be recovery-related questions. I enjoy answering questions. I enjoy being able to clear up any confusion or give information about, different things within recovery. So I love answering recovery questions, but I also love just answering questions. That's what I like doing. So if you have any questions, please submit them. You can submit them on the website, www.cleanandfilthypodcast.com. We have a contact us page. Send them on over there. So, I can answer them potentially on air. But before we get into the questions, I have questions for you. Oh, how the tables have turned. The turns have tabled. That's right. I have questions for you, my wonderful audience. I have 2 questions. One of them, as I, want to progress into doing interviews on this podcast, my question is how my audience would like to consume them, because I really enjoy doing this live stream element. And if I have pre-recorded interviews, how would I implement them? I could potentially still start the live stream, then play the pre-recorded interview, and then come back and do the rest of the show live. Or do you guys think I should just do separate additional episodes just for interviews? Let me know. Send me emails, hit me up on in the comments, whatever. I just am curious what you guys think. And also, speaking of that Carolina Reaper chili challenge at Buffalo Wild Wings, would anybody have interest maybe not yet, but once, things start winding down with the pandemic a little bit more, to a live in-person Clean and Filthy podcast meetup where the host attempts the Carolina Reaper Pepper Challenge. Of course, we would have to live stream it because why wouldn't we? Let me know in the comments or send me messages. Let me know if there would be any interest in that. Trying to gauge interest before I commit to absolutely murdering my intestinal tract for the sake of, views and fun. So those are the questions that the addict asked y'all. Now it's time for the questions that y'all asked the addict. All right. First question says, what does spiritual, not religious mean? That's something that's read in every single opening to every single meeting. This is a spiritual program, not a religious program. And we've talked about this a little bit before in episodes 2 and 3 regarding higher power, regarding our higher power's will. The reason why it's not that, for one thing, is because when carrying that primary purpose, when having that group autonomy, when not wanting to, we're going through the traditions kind of backwards here. When not wanting to say who can and can't be a member. When we want to keep a unified perspective. If you bring in a religious element to it, no matter what that religious element is, it's not going to translate to a huge portion of the rest of the world. If the fellowship was a Muslim religious fellowship, then that's going to automatically, essentially disqualify all other religions. Same thing if it was a Jewish fellowship or a Christian fellowship or whatever. So that is the main reason why it is not a religious thing, because nobody has the right in recovery to tell me what my higher power is. That personal autonomy to figure that out, and that journey, that is so much fun. That spiritual journey. Not only is it a great song, but it's a great opportunity to grow. We talk about this a lot on episodes 2 and 3, so check those out if you haven't heard the spiritual portion of this. But if this was a religious program, I can tell you for a fact I would not be sitting here right now, because that doesn't work for me. But it being a spiritual program, which for some people is a religious element. Some people, spirituality is their religion. But spirituality doesn't have to mean religion. And that's what works so well for an addict like me. For an addict like me who doesn't vibe with a specific thought process for my higher power, this program allows me to define it, allows me that freedom, that ability to choose, that ability to develop, that ability to grow and change. If this was a religious program and it said, the higher power is, Jesus, that's it. That wouldn't work for a lot of people. And it would never be able to be changed. Recovery tells me that my higher power can be whatever I want it to be. It could be Jesus. It doesn't have to be. And just because your higher power is something at some point doesn't mean that's what it's going to always be. Doesn't mean that we can't grow and change and develop into something more. And that's what it means when we say it's a spiritual, not a religious program, because it is a spiritual program. We can't work this program without a concept of a higher power. And that speaks to a level of spirituality. That speaks to a level of faith. That speaks to a level of belief that requires spirituality. That we talk about prayer, we talk about meditation, we talk about our higher power's will. These are all elements that are spiritual, but they're not religious, which very much works for an addict like me. So that's what we got for the first question. Hopefully that gives some more clarity within there. I gotta say, we had another really good Lamborghini question, but the fact that I, fanboyed so hardcore on Lamborghini last episode, we're gonna delay it until next episode, because maybe I should answer, because then maybe I'll get sponsored by Lamborghini, and now that shit right there, that would be fire. I love being able to use that sound effect too. All right, so next question says, why do you always talk about how amazing conventions are? I've talked about this before, about one of the greatest experiences that I, have had in my recovery. One of the best spiritual awakening type of moments was coming to my first convention, my first state convention, or regional convention, when I had like 100 days clean, and why that was so huge. And it's just the best way I can explain it is the biggest feeling of belonging. It is the best feeling of feeling a part of. Walking into a room with 1,500 other addicts that do not look, sound, anything like what you could ever expect. Man, that's the juice, man. Like seeing that unified collective, like tying it to the fifth tradition. That grouping together, that unified primary purpose of all these walks of life, the greatest cross section of humanity that I've personally ever seen. I mean, it's like going into a sporting event arena, except I can't even use that because that requires money, and that requires, some type of playoff tickets ain't cheap, but to see just this mass of such a cross section of everybody coming together, it is just so beautiful. And getting to hear the message on different specific topics from different people from different states and countries. It's like I can imagine, for somebody, it's like for somebody who's really into comic books, going to Comic-Con, dressing up and going to Comic-Con. It's your people. It's your vibe. It's your collective group of like-minded people carrying a like-minded purpose. Man, it's yeah, if you've never been to a convention, hit me up. Especially, if you're interested in going to a convention in the Arizona region or Arizona area, give me a call, hit me up, send me a message, and I would be more than happy to discuss more with you, plus also possible service opportunities that we won't talk about on air, but we'll happily discuss when we are not on air. So that's why conventions are fire. I'm not even going to push It's Lit again because I wanted to. I'm going to push it again.
It's lit. It's lit.
Yeah. All right. That was, I set that up so unorganically. I'm disappointed with myself on that one, but whatever. I still got to push it. Next question. Said, what is the most difficult part of my recovery? Like, what is the most difficult part of my, recovery today? And this is a great question. This is a great question because when I look at, recovery and how it's grown and how it's changed over the last 3.5 years, it really shows when I say that recovery isn't about not using drugs. Maybe in the very beginning it was. Maybe in the very beginning that was the main thing I cared about. I'm just not going to use drugs. Hell do I do that? Help me.
Help me.
But now that I've gotten, a few 24 hours together in a row clean, that not using drugs isn't the main thought anymore. That's not the thing that's difficult in recovery. I was at Buffalo Wild Wings last night, and it wasn't like, oh my God, they have alcohol here, I want to go drink something. It wasn't like having these thoughts of, in the past going to Buffalo Wild Wings when I would go, blow lines in the bathroom. It wasn't anything like that. It was just, I'm having fun in this element. Cool. But the things that still are difficult for me, the things that still are challenging for me are the ways that I want to deal with feelings at times. And this is something we're going to talk about a lot more as we go further within this podcast. And we're going to talk about, the healthy reactions to things and the ways that we process feelings and the way that we implement spiritual principles in all areas of our lives. Because those are the things that I still struggle with at times. not using drugs isn't the thing that I struggle with. Like I've said before, there's still times that something will pop into my mind, or I'm, going through Snapchat and see somebody that used to be in the program getting loaded, and that might trigger something for a second, but that's not a difficult thing in my recovery. The difficult thing in my recovery is dealing with feelings and dealing with them in a healthy perspective. Not using sex or porn or, horribly unhealthy food or ego stroking type of things that aren't healthy, that aren't beneficial. Those are the things that I struggle with way more than I struggle with not using. Those are the parts of my recovery that take a lot more work than the not using. In the beginning, it was all about not using. Day after day, just for today, not using drugs. But then that grows into not using people, not using sex as a means to cope, not using, compulsive porn as a means to cope, not using a large Domino's pizza as a means to cope. And I'm not saying that none of those things would be okay in moderation. I'm saying that when I'm using those things to mask a feeling or to not live within reality, that's the problem. And that is something that I struggle with. That is something that I've always struggled with. And we're going to talk about the correlation between sex and ego, and using sex to not feel feelings, and using sex to numb out the exact same way that I would with drugs for so many years. And we're going to get into that. We're going to get into a lot about healthy sexuality and how I struggle with that. And separating ego from, the character defect of ego, and implementing the spiritual principle of humility. How I struggle with that. So we're going to get into that a lot more, but I would say that my biggest struggle or the most difficult part of my recovery is the processing of feelings in healthy ways, is, dealing with the normal life things that come up with healthy ways, because not using drugs is a reality. I'm not using just for today. So that isn't my go-to. If something happens where in the past I would have been like, I'm getting fucked up, that's what's happening, fuck everything else, I'm getting fucked up. Now that thought process doesn't go to that, but it goes to, I don't want to feel this, I'm going to do some fuck shit, so I'm going to burn my fucking life down without putting drugs in my body. And we'll discuss it. I can burn my life down clean. I don't need to put substances in my body to make my life unmanageable. You know why? Because I'm a fucking addict. I'm a fucking addict who doesn't want to process feelings in a healthy way. So I want the cheap and easy and fast and quick option. And I've done that in the past. So that's what I'm working on. That's what I'm working on the most. That's the area of my recovery that I'm putting the most effort. And also, it's finding a balance. It's finding a balance because I've been doing a lot of service work lately, and I'm potentially going to be moving into a couple new positions of service work. And it's trying to find that balance between all of the different service work and still doing my step work and tradition work and working with sponsees and going, being a service at my home group and balancing that with trying to build a business and a podcast and, being a father and going to the gym and trying to be healthy and trying not to eat that entire bag of delicious pretzel Muddy Buddies that's sitting on my counter right now that I'm probably going to eat the whole bag of. Just saying. It's finding that balance. So personally, that's what I would say. It's kind of a two-part there. It's finding a balance, and it's actually properly and healthily processing feelings. Yeah, that's what we're going to go with. So thank you all for the questions. I love answering questions. If you have any questions that you would like to have answered, please make sure to send them over to Matthew at CleanAndFilthyPodcast.com or submit them on all of the social media platforms. I love answering questions, and I love being able to, give some insight from the perspective of an addict in recovery, because I can tell you for a fact the way that my mind works is going to be different than, the way that a non-addict's mind works. So if I can help answer some questions, you don't have to go randomly find an addict. This addict's right here, and he's here to help. So thank you for the questions. We will answer more next week. And now it's almost time. We're almost out of time. It's almost time to put on one of my favorite songs and close out the episode. But first, we got those Clean Time shout-outs. That's right, y'all. This is the time of the show where I get massively hype. Massively. We're going to just... I got a nice drink there. Some more bang all up in me. Woo, yeah.
Phrasing?
Bang all up in me. That part. Anyway, this is the part of the show where we recognize people who have gotten continuous clean time within recovery. We celebrate all of the universally recognized milestones. What are those, you ask? Well, that means a newcomer, which is anybody with 29 days or less, 30 days clean, 60 days clean, 90 days clean, 6 months clean, 9 months clean, 1 whole year clean, 18 months clean, and multiple years clean, which means 2 or more. But we like to do things a little different here, so we also like to give shout-outs. If you've got a big number, if you've got a 500 days, 100 days, 1,000 days, 5,000 days, we like to give shout-outs for those. So if you have some clean time coming up, make sure to send it over to me, Matthew, at CleanAndFilthyPodcast.com. Include what you're celebrating, what your first name is, what your last initial is, and we will give you a shout-out here on air. So... God, I love doing clean time. First up, and most importantly, as a newcomer, we got my man Ethan. Yeah. And then with 30 days clean, we got my homegirl Danny. Well done. And then with 30 days clean, we got my boy Paul from Twitter. Well done, well done. And then with 4 years clean, we got my fellow namesake, a fellow Matthew. Awesome dude. If anybody's ever looking for any kind of collectible toys, specifically Funko Pops or Squishmallows, holla at me and I'll put you on to him, because he's the plug when it comes to Funko. So my boy Matt with 4 years. Well done, my brother. Next up, we gotta strap in extendo on this one. We're going out to Vegas with my boy Derek with 24 years clean. Yeah. All right, that was at least 24. That was 24. Next up. You thought 24 was a lot, right? Shit. Putting in the drum mag on this one. Because we going to my man, Greg W. First off, big shout out, Greg. You helped me a lot when I was figuring stuff out, getting ready for this podcast. So big shout out to you, my brother. With 31 years. Years. Goddamn. That's what we doing here. That's how we do. That's how we celebrate. We close the show by getting hype. Because I don't know about y'all, but I'm hype AF right now. I am hype AF. So if you have clean time that's coming up and you want to add to my hypeness, send it over to your boy Matthew at CleanAndFilthyPodcast.com. And we will get you on air with them shout outs. Congratulations, everybody who picked up clean time today. And if you didn't, that's fine. Just don't use and you will. That's literally how this program works. And remember that every day clean is a successful day.
That part.
All right, y'all. Well, we are officially at the end of the show. We are out of time. Thank you all for being here. Huge shout out again to everybody for being here. Episode 17. Thank you all. Massive shout out to and thank you to our episode sponsor, Etc. by Emily. Information down below. Huge thank you to Valentino Khan, Alice in Wonderland for this magical song in my ears right now. All that info below. And of course, I love each and every one of you. Even if I don't know you, even if I'll never meet you, I love you. And thank you for being a part of my recovery. I will see everybody next week. Have a wonderful week. Stay blessed.